Hi, this is Tara Reed, and I'm so excited to introduce you to my second Hanukkah fabric line with Riley Blake called Hanukkah Nights. It will be shipping in May of 2023. Unfortunately, I am a victim of supply chain issues. We weren't able to get the sample fabric to me in time for me to get something sewn up and get these videos done for a virtual quilt market because I am going on a trip right before to go visit my son who lives in London, so far from Portland, Oregon. So I decided to punt because I really wanted to be the one to introduce this line to you. Let me show you what's coming. So the main print is going to be more colorful than my last collection, and it's going to have more icons to it. It's going to have the dreidels, gifts, the oil lamp, and of course the menorahs and the Star of David. And this is going to come in 3 colorways: the blue background, a beautiful gray background, and then a white background. So that's the main print. Then we have the Star of David, which are great for blenders. These can also be used all year round. We can't have Hanukkah without our dreidels and our gelt. And then this one is going to come with a placemat panel. So the last collection, we had a table runner, we had an apron, and now we're going to get your tabletop ready because these 2 collections will blend together if you did purchase the last one. So let me show you some closer ups of each of these images. Here's a peek behind the scenes into the painting process that I used to work on the art for Hanukkah Nights. I just drew some dreidels on here. This is what I'm going to show you. And then sometimes when I'm using a lot of a color, I will put it into one of these little dishes. One really important thing when you're painting with watercolors is to not get grease, aka body lotion, hand lotion, onto your paper, because if you do, the paint won't absorb and it goes really weird. So if I'm ever painting, and I'm right-handed, so if I'm going to be painting on this one, I'll be leaning on this one. So I always put a piece of paper over here and just kind of work from left to right or move my paper around. So one of the trickiest things when you're working on a new painting is trying to decide on the color. So I'll usually just do a couple little color swatches and then add water and show how it's going to bleed out if I do it thinner. And this color is actually called Payne's Gray. I use it a lot for blues. It's very neutral. And then when I go to Photoshop, I can often put a brighter color if I want to increase the saturation. Now, another one that I like for this purpose, and I think this is the one that I used mostly for this collection, is Winsor Blue from Winsor Newton, red shade. They have a couple different ones. So it's brighter. It's a little bit, if we're going Goldilocks, this is a little too gray of a blue, and this is a little too bright. So I might just mix some of it together in one of these little empty spots here. And let's see what that does. So it's a darker, it's got more blue in it than this. So I'm just going to play around. And sometimes I'll mix right in my painting. When I'm painting, I always work in the section of the painting. So instead of covering this whole thing, I'll pretend, okay, I'm going to paint this side of the dreidel first, because this one's going to be a little bit of a different shade than this side over here. And so I always just get a basic wash down for the section. And then you'll see some spots are keeping a little bit more water and color. And so if I'm good with that, I just leave it. If I want it to be a little bit different than how it's coming out with the initial wash, I can rinse my brush. So say I want a little less color here. This has no color on it and very little water. So I can just kind of use it to sop up some of the water and color and make a lighter spot there. So watercolor, it's very dynamic, and you kind of learn what works for you and your style, but at the same time, you never quite know what's going to happen, which I think is kind of fun. So then I'm just going to add a little bit more of this bright color in here and let that mix in right on my dreidel. So you'll see, because it's wet, it's kind of bleeding around. We're gonna let that dry and see what happens. And I may come back to it and put a little bit more color over the top of that. But now I'm just gonna go to a different section. Now this top section is gonna be a lot darker. So I'm gonna work just with this straight Payne's Gray full color. But the most important thing is if I don't want it to bleed down into this, I need to not touch that top edge. Because here's what'll happen. So because this is wet, if I put more next to it that's wet, see how it just bleeds right up, which sometimes you want. That's great when you're like putting trees into a background, but it's not what I'm looking for on this dreidel. So I'm gonna be really careful to get close to that line, but not touch it. Oh, you also might notice that I'm not putting the symbols on this dreidel, and that is on purpose. I often paint and do things in layers and then layer the hand painted objects together in Photoshop, because if I paint this and have the symbols in it, then that's just the way it is. It's one dreidel. But if I paint it this way and add the symbols later, I can make two different ones based on what symbols I choose to put on there. And let's see how now the darker on the top and the lighter and a little darker, it's giving it some dimension. I'm gonna make this side a little bit brighter. And again, I'm gonna go really close, but not touch. I'm gonna put a little more of that saturated over here. And we have a dreidel, and that was made from 2 colors, created all this variation and this beautiful dreidel.